Elara had given him everything. Her heart, her body, her wolf, her very soul, and in return Silas, the Alpha King of the Ironhold Pack, stood before his court with another woman at his side. The great hall fell into a suffocating silence as his deep voice echoed off the ancient stone walls. "This is my true family." Elara did not scream. She did not weep. The air in the room grew suddenly thin-heavy, with the scent of roasted venison, spilled wine, and the sharp, freezing terror spiking in her own blood. She simply placed her trembling hand over her stomach. Beneath the silk of her emerald gown, a tiny, fragile heartbeat fluttered. His child, the royal heir she had been waiting to reveal to him this very night. Instead of a celebration, she was attending her own execution. She turned and walked out of the great hall of Ironhold. She did not look back. The whispers of 500 wolves followed her, slithering through the air like venomous snakes. Look at her face. She actually thought the king loved her. She was a weak little Omega anyway. She never belonged here. They were right about one thing. She had believed him. When Silas had claimed her, when his teeth had pierced the skin of her neck, marking her as his Luna, she had felt the mate bond snap into place. It had been a warm, golden hum in her chest. He had whispered against her skin that she was his forever. His scent of sharp pine and winter rain had been her sanctuary. But Elara was not just a weak, discarded mate. She carried a secret in her veins, a secret older and more dangerous than any wolf in the Ironhold Pack. A secret she had hidden because she wanted Silas to love her for the woman she was not, the power she possessed. Now that secret would leave with her alongside the tiny life growing in her womb. 3 years later, the Alpha King would finally track her down. He would fall to his knees before a boy with his exact silver eyes. He would finally understand the catastrophic magnitude of what he had destroyed. But by then, the deadly frost curse in his veins would be killing him, and the only one capable of burning that curse away would be the woman he had publicly thrown away like trash. Neither of them knew yet that his betrayal was a manufactured lie, and the truth, when it finally clawed its way into the light, would burn their entire world to ash. The great hall of Ironhold had never looked more magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings, casting a warm glow over the finest wolves from every territory. It was the winter solstice gala. The air was thick, heavy with the competing sense of expensive perfumes, alpha dominance, and quiet political schemes. Elara stood near a towering marble pillar, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. She watched her mate from across the room, Silas. Even after 2 years of marriage, just looking at him made her breath catch. He was massive, built like a god of war, with midnight black hair and eyes the color of a breaking winter storm. Every time he moved, the crowd parted, not just out of respect, but out of a primal, instinctual awe. He was smiling at a foreign dignitary, but the smile did not reach his eyes. It was practiced, cold. Elara pressed a hand to her lower belly. Tonight, when the guests finally left, she would pull him into their chambers. She would take his large, calloused hand and place it right here. The royal healers had confirmed it this morning. A strong heartbeat, a healthy pup, an heir to the Ironhold throne. You look pale, my dear. Elara flinched. The scent of bitter, crushed orchids hit her nose before she even turned. Vesper, the king's stepmother. The older woman wore a gown of dark velvet, her sharp features set in a mask of elegant cruelty. Vesper had never hidden her disdain for Elara. "I am perfectly fine, Vesper," Elara replied, keeping her voice even, just overwhelmed by the crowd. "Are you?" Vesper's lips curled into a smirk. You should be standing at your king's side, not hiding in the shadows like a frightened rabbit. But then again, perhaps the shadows are where you truly belong. Before Elara could defend herself, the heavy blast of a ceremonial horn shattered the chatter. The music stopped. 500 faces turned toward the raised dais at the front of the hall. Silas stood there. But he was not alone. A woman stood beside him, Freya of the Northern Ridge. She was stunning. Tall blonde, radiating the pure dominant energy of a high-ranking alpha female. Rumors had always whispered that Freya was supposed to be the king's mate, long before Silas had defied counsel and chosen Elara instead. My honored guests. Silas's voice boomed, deep, authoritative, absolute. Elara's heart began to hammer against her ribs. Thump, thump, thump. The mate bond deep inside her chest suddenly flared, then twisted violently. Something was terribly wrong. His scent, the pine and winter rain, was gone, replaced by something metallic and dead, like ice over a grave. For 2 years I have allowed a mistake to sit upon the iron-holed throne. Silas continued, his silver eyes sweeping over the crowd, completely devoid of emotion. A marriage made out of momentary weakness. Tonight, I correct that fatal error. The room began to spin. Elara gripped the cold marble pillar so hard her knuckles turned white. Her wolf whined in the back of her mind, a pathetic, fearful sound. Silas reached out and placed his large hand on Freya's lower back. It was an intimate, possessive gesture, the exact way he used to touch Elara. Freya has always been my true match. Silas's voice was like a physical blow. She is my equal, my true family. He looked directly at Elara then. Across the sea of shocked faces, their eyes met. Elara searched his storm-grey eyes for a hint of a joke, a flicker of warmth, a sign that he was under a spell. But there was nothing, just a vast, empty wasteland of ice. The woman who currently holds the title of Luna is no longer recognized by this court. Silas declared, "She is banished." Gasps ripped through the hall. Some wolves whispered in shock. Others let out low, mocking laughs. The heavy gaze of the entire pack fell on Elara. It felt like 100 burning blades slicing into her skin. She waited for the mate bond to pull at him. She waited for him to blink to realize what he was doing. He just turned his back to her, leaning down to whisper something into Freya's ear. Freya smiled, a triumphant, glowing smile. 2 years of devotion, 2 years of giving him every piece of her soul, erased in 2 minutes. Elara let go of the pillar. She forced her spine to straighten. She would not cry. She would not give Vesper the satisfaction of watching her break. With slow, measured steps, she walked toward the heavy oak doors. The crowd parted for her, their eyes tracking her humiliation. "She has absolutely nothing," a noble whispered as she passed. "She is a dead wolf walking." They were wrong. She had the iron-hold air safe inside her. As she reached the massive doors, she paused for a fraction of a second. The mate bond inside her chest severed with a violent, agonizing snap. She gasped, the physical pain driving her to her knees, but she caught herself on the doorframe. Silas did not even look back. The doors groaned open, and Elara stepped out into the raging blizzard. The heavy wood slammed shut behind her, sounding exactly like a tomb. The cold hit her like a physical wall. She wore only thin silk and delicate slippers. The snow was already up to her ankles, the wind howling through the dark pines like a dying animal. Her wolf clawed at her mind, desperate bleeding from the broken bond. It wanted to run back, it wanted to tear Freya's throat out. Quiet. Elara whispered to her wolf, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. "We have to survive for the pup." She forced her frozen feet to move. Left, right, left. The snow quickly soaked through her slippers. Within minutes she could no longer feel her toes. The wind bit into her exposed shoulders, turning her pale skin a bruised, mottled purple. My true family. Silas's words echoed over and over in her mind, louder than the storm. Had he felt anything at all? When he kissed her forehead just hours ago, was it all a lie? The emptiness in his eyes terrified her more than the freezing temperature. A sudden sharp cramp seized her lower abdomen. Elara cried out, stumbling forward and catching herself against the rough bark of a pine tree. No, she sobbed, wrapping both arms protectively over her stomach. Please, moon goddess, not my baby, please. She closed her eyes and focused all her remaining energy inward. The tiny faint warmth was still there. The heartbeat was slow but steady. She had to keep moving. 3 miles through the treacherous blackwood forest to reach the edge of the territory. There was an old, abandoned hunter's cabin there. If she could just reach it, she could start a fire. She could survive the night. Her breath came in ragged white clouds. The trees loomed over her like giant mocking shadows. She lost track of time. The cold stopped hurting and transitioned into a heavy, dangerous numbness. Her vision blurred at the edges. Just a little further, she chanted to herself. Her legs finally gave out. She collapsed into a deep snowdrift. The snow felt incredibly soft, almost like a warm blanket. As her eyes, heavy and dark, a scent cut through the frost. Wood smoke and herbs. Footsteps crunched rapidly through the snow. A lantern swung into her fading field of vision. Rough, warm hands grabbed her shoulders, pulling her out of the snowbank. Elara, a familiar, panicked voice cried out. By the goddess child Clara. It was Clara, her old nursemaid, who lived on the outskirts of the pack borders. Clara. Elara's voice was barely a raspy whisper. My baby. Please save my baby. The darkness rushed in, swallowing the snow, the cold and the shattered pieces of her heart. 3 years. That was how long it had been since the winter storm swallowed her past. The village of Ashwood was nothing more than a forgotten smudge on the map. It sat at the bottom of a steep valley, hidden by dense forests and jagged peaks. It was a place for outcasts, for wolves with no pack, no alpha, and no history. It was the perfect place to disappear. Elara stood by the open window of her small wooden cabin, a warm breeze gently lifting her hair. Her hands were covered in flour from the morning's baking, but she did not care. Her eyes were fixed on the meadow outside. A little boy was running through the tall, sunlit grass, chasing a golden butterfly. His laughter rang through the quiet valley, bright and completely untainted by the cruelty of the world. Leo. He was 3 years old now. He was small for his age, but he possessed a fierce, stubborn spirit. He had her dark hair, but every time he turned around, Elara's breath would hitch. His eyes, they were the exact color of a breaking winter storm. Silver, piercing. They were Silas eyes. Mama, look, Leo shouted, cupping his small hands together. I caught it. Be gentle, my little wolf. Elara called back, forcing a warm smile onto her face. Let it fly. Leo opened his hands, watching the butterfly flutter up toward the blue sky with absolute wonder. He was her entire universe. Every day she spent chopping wood, mending clothes, and scraping by was for him. She had hidden her true nature entirely. The ancient phoenix blood that ran in her veins was locked away, buried beneath layers of fear and exhaustion. If she used her fire, the magical signature would alert the alpha courts. So she lived as a fragile, human-like omega. No shifting, no magic, just a mother protecting her cub. But the nights were the hardest. In the dead of night, the severed mate bond in her chest would ache. It was a phantom pain throbbing right beneath her ribs. She would dream of sharp pine and winter rain. She would dream of Silas's heavy hands on her skin, right before his voice echoed in the great hall, stripping her of everything. She would wake up gasping, her pillow soaked with tears, her heart hammering wildly in her chest. Thump, thump, thump. The sudden sound of frantic galloping broke her from her thoughts. Elara wiped her hands on her apron, her maternal instincts flaring instantly. She stepped out onto the porch. A horse tore up the dirt path toward her cabin. The rider was Clara. The old nursemaid looked exhausted, her grey hair escaping her bonnet, her face pale and drawn. She practically fell off the saddle before the horse even came to a complete stop. Clara, what is wrong? Elara rushed forward, catching the older woman's arm. The scent of sour fear rolled off Clara in waves. Inside. We must go inside now. Clara gasped, glancing over her shoulder at the tree line, as if she expected a monster to burst from the shadows. Elara grabbed Leo, scooping him up into her arms, and hurried them all into the cabin. She bolted the heavy wooden door shut. The air in the room grew tense. Leo sensed the shift in his mother's mood and buried his face in her neck, completely quiet. "What is it?" Elara demanded, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "Did a rogue pack attack the trading posts?" No. Clara leaned against the kitchen table, trying to catch her breath. "It is the Ironhold trackers, the king's personal guard. They were at the post this morning, Elara. They were asking questions, handing out heavy bags of gold for any information about a woman matching your exact description." Elara's blood turned to ice. A cold shiver violently racked her spine. 3 years. He had ignored her existence for 3 long years. Why now? Why come hunting for a discarded mate when he had Freya at his side? "They do not know about Leo," Elara said quickly, panic making her voice tremble. "They cannot know. I have never left this valley. They are not looking for the boy," Clara said, looking up, with eyes full of sorrow. "They are looking for you, Elara, because the Alpha King is dying." The room tilted. Elara grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Her heart stuttered. Dying Silas was the strongest Alpha on the continent. He was a god of war. Nothing could kill him. "That is impossible," Elara whispered. "It is true. The rumors have been bleeding out of the capital for months, but the merchants confirmed it today." Clara's voice shook. "Silas collapsed a year ago. The healers cannot save him. They say frost covers his skin. His veins are turning black. He is being eaten alive from the inside by a curse." A curse. Elara's mind raced. The ancient text she had read as a child flashed behind her eyes. There was only one curse that manifested as physical frost, Winterbane, a dark, forbidden poison brewed from blood magic. It was designed to do only one thing: sever the bond between true mates. Vesper. The name tasted like ash on Elara's tongue. His stepmother poisoned him. The merchants say the king never marked Freya. Clara continued, dropping the final shattering truth. The announcement at the solstice gala was a lie. Freya has no mate mark. Silas refused to touch her. Since the day you walked out into the snow, the king has been a madman. He has turned the continent upside down looking for you. He sent hundreds of scouts. He drained the treasury. The curse is fighting his wolf, and his wolf is fighting for you. Elara could not breathe. Her chest heaved. The phantom ache of her severed mate bond suddenly flared, burning hot and sharp. He was poisoned. He did not reject me of his own free will. The Winterbane froze his emotions. It made him a puppet. The realization hit her with the force of a falling mountain. Silas had looked at her with dead eyes because the poison had literally frozen his heart. He had not chosen Freya. Vesper had orchestrated the entire humiliation to break Elara's spirit, force her into exile, and secure control over the king. Tears spilled over Elara's lashes, hot and fast. She had spent 1,000 nights hating him. She had spent 3 years building walls around her heart to survive the agony of his betrayal. And it had all been a lie. He was dying because his wolf refused to let her go. The Winterbane was killing him because the true mate bond was fighting back. How close are the trackers? Elara asked, her voice hardening. The tears stopped. The weak, frightened Omega retreated, and the ancient fire buried deep inside her bloodline gave a low, rumbling stir. Too close, Clara warned. They will search this valley by nightfall. If they find you, they will drag you back to the capital. And if Vesper sees the boy, she will not hesitate. Vesper will kill him. Elara finished the sentence. Vesper wanted her own son, Rowan, on the throne. A legitimate heir, born of the true Luna, would ruin everything. Leo was a death sentence to Vesper's reign. We have to run, Elara said immediately. She set Leo down and began throwing clothes into a leather satchel. We pack right now. We head deeper into the northern pikes. We can cross the border into the rogue territories by tomorrow morning. Mama Leo tugged at her skirt. His little silver eyes were wide with confusion. Are the bad men coming? I will not let anyone hurt you, Leo. I promise. Elara kissed his forehead, her lips lingering against his warm skin. She would burn the world to ashes before she let Vesper touch a single hair on her son's head. She moved frantically, stuffing dried meat, herbs, and thick blankets into the bag. Clara helped, her hands shaking as she strapped the saddlebags tightly. They had to leave immediately. There was no time to say goodbye to the villagers. No time to secure the cabin. Elara threw her heavy winter cloak over her shoulders. She reached for Leo, ready to carry him out the back door. But before her fingers could brush his arm, her wolf froze. A scent drifted through the cracks in the wooden window shutters. It was faint at first, carried on the shifting valley wind, but Elara would know that scent anywhere. It was carved into her soul, sharp pine and winter rain, but beneath it was the metallic bitter tang of blood and frost. He was here, not his trackers, not his scouts. The Alpha King himself had come. A heavy, dragging footstep sounded on the wooden planks of her porch. Then another, the sheer, overwhelming dominance of an alpha aura slammed into the cabin. It was so oppressive, so suffocating, that Clara gasped and fell to her knees, unable to withstand the pressure. Leo whimpered, hiding behind Elara's legs. Elara stood frozen in the center of the room, her heart slammed against her ribs in a frantic, terrifying rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. The mate bond in her chest screamed. It clawed at her, desperate, hungry, pulling her toward the door. A heavy knock echoed through the quiet cabin. It was not the knock of a conqueror. It was slow, weak. The sound of a man at the absolute end of his life. Elara. The voice was rough, scraped, raw, and shattered. It sounded nothing like the booming, authoritative king who had banished her. It sounded like a ghost begging for salvation. Please, open the door. Elara's breath hitched in her throat. Her hands shook violently as she stared at the heavy wooden planks separating her from the man who had broken her heart, the father of her child, and the true mate, who was currently freezing to death. On her porch, she took a step forward. The fire in her blood answered his call. Elara's hand trembled as it hovered over the heavy iron latch. Her wolf paced frantically in her mind, tearing at the mental cages she had built over 3 years. The mate bond pulled at her chest with the gravitational force of a dying star. With a sharp exhale, she threw the bolt back and pulled the door open. The wind howled, blowing a swirl of white snow into the warm cabin. and there he was, Silas, the Alpha King of the Ironhold Pack, the most powerful man on the continent. He was a ghost of the man she remembered. Elara's breath caught in her throat, a sharp gasp of pure shock. Silas was leaning heavily against the wooden door frame, his massive frame hunched and trembling. His skin, once a warm, sun-kissed olive, was now a sickly, translucent white. Blue veins, completely frozen and black at the edges, crawled up his neck and across his sharp jawline like a spiderweb of ice. Ice crystals clung to his dark hair and his eyelashes. But it was his eyes that shattered her. The winter storm silver was dimmed, clouded with unspeakable agony. Yet when his gaze met hers, a desperate, violent spark of life flared in them. Elara, he breathed. The sound was a broken rasp, completely devoid of the alpha command that used to shake the very earth. "You should not be here," Elara said, her voice shaking, despite her desperate attempt to sound strong. She took a step back, blocking his view into the cabin. "You banished me. You made your choice. Go back to Freya. Go back to your true family." "I have no family," Silas choked out, taking a heavy dragging step inside. The cold radiated off his body in actual waves, chilling the warm air of the room. "I never did. Not since the night you walked out of the great hall." Elara's hands curled into fists at her sides. "Do not lie to me, Silas." "I stood there. I felt the bond snap. I watched you look at me with nothing but empty ice in your eyes. I felt my heart stop while you smiled at another woman, because my heart was already frozen." He grabbed the wooden frame, his knuckles white, fighting just to stay standing. "Vesper poisoned me. Winterbane. It was in the ceremonial wine. By the time I stood on that dais, I could not feel anything. The poison severed my emotions. It froze my soul. I was a passenger in my own body, watching myself destroy the only thing I ever truly loved." The words hit Elara like physical strikes to the chest. Clara had told her the rumors, but hearing it from him, feeling the absolute, undeniable truth of it through their damaged mate bond, was entirely different. "When did you wake up?" Elara whispered, the anger draining from her, replaced by a hollow, aching sorrow. "The moment the heavy doors closed behind you." Silas closed his eyes, a single frozen tear escaping and sliding down his pale cheek. The physical distance weakened the poison's hold just enough for my wolf to realize what had happened. "I tore the great hall apart. I shifted and hunted you into the blizzard. But the scent trail was lost in the snow. You were gone." He swayed on his feet, his breathing shallow and erratic. "And I have been dying every single second since. The poison was meant to kill the bond, but our bond refused to die, so the Winterbane is killing me instead." Elara stared at the dying king, the man who had been her entire world. The urge to reach out, to wrap her arms around his freezing body and warm him was almost unbearable. Her inner phoenix, the ancient fire resting in her blood, sparked and hummed beneath her skin. It wanted to heal its mate. But before she could move, a small voice broke the heavy silence. Mama Silas froze. The king of Ironhold went completely, unnaturally still. Leo peeked out from behind Elara's heavy winter skirt. The little boy clutched a carved wooden wolf. In his hands, his head tilted in curiosity, he looked up at the towering, frost-covered man blocking their doorway. Silas slowly, agonizingly, lowered his gaze. The silence in the cabin became absolute. Even the howling wind outside seemed to stop. Silas stared at the boy. He took in the dark, messy hair, the small, stubborn jaw, and then he saw the eyes, silver, bright clear and identical to his own. Elara watched Silas's chest stop moving. He stopped breathing entirely. The realization crashed into the Alpha King with the force of a meteor. A son. Silas's legs gave out. The most feared alpha on the continent collapsed, hitting the wooden floorboards on his knees. The floor shook from his weight. He did not try to stand back up. He stayed on his knees, his massive shoulders shaking violently as a sob, a deep, guttural, heart-wrenching sound of pure agony ripped from his throat. Goddess. Silas wept, burying his face in his trembling, frost-covered hands. Merciful goddess, what have I done? Leo stepped back, frightened by the large man's sudden collapse. Elara immediately knelt, pulling her son against her chest, wrapping her arms around him protectively. She looked at Silas, her own tears finally spilling over. You gave me nothing, Elara said, her voice thick with emotion. I walked out into a blizzard with nothing but the clothes on my back and your air in my womb. I gave birth in a stranger's bed. I chopped wood to keep him warm. I hid him from the world because I thought his own father did not want him. I am sorry. Silas choked on the words, his forehead resting against the cold floorboards. I am so sorry, Elara. I would tear my own heart out to give you back those years. I would burn in hell for eternity if it meant I could hold him just once. He lifted his head. His face was a mask of sheer devastation. He looked at Leo, his silver eyes filled with a love so desperate and hungry, it made Elara's breath catch. He is beautiful, Silas whispered, reaching a trembling hand out, stopping just inches from Leo's face. He did not dare touch him. His skin was too cold. He is perfect, my true heir. Leo stared at the man. Are you the sick king? The little boy asked, innocently. Mama said a bad king was looking for us. The words were a dagger twisting in Silas' chest. Yes, little wolf. Silas managed a broken smile. I am the sick king, and I was very, very bad to your mother. Silas pulled his hand back, gripping his own chest as a violent coughing fit seized him. Black blood laced with sharp ice crystals splattered onto the floor. The curse was accelerating. The stress of the journey and the emotional shock were tearing his failing body apart. Silas Elara shifted forward, her instincts overriding her fear. She grabbed his broad shoulders. His skin felt like solid ice. You are freezing. Clara, get the blankets. Put more wood on the fire. No. Silas grabbed Elara's wrists. His grip was weak but desperate. Listen to me, Elara. There is no time. The trackers are dead. What? Elara froze. What do you mean they are dead, Vesper? Silas gasped for air, his lungs rattling. She knew. I was tracking a lead here. She let my men find the village, and then she slaughtered them. Her personal assassins are right behind me. They are coming for you. Elara's blood ran cold. Vesper is coming here. Yes. Silas forced himself to look into Elara's eyes. He squeezed her wrists, trying to impart the absolute urgency of his words. Listen to me. The Winterbane is not just a poison. It is a blood magic curse. Vesper designed it perfectly. If the curse is not broken before I die, it does not simply vanish. Silas swallowed hard, his silver eyes locking onto Leo. It passes to my closest blood relative. It passes to the air. Elara stopped breathing. The entire world seemed to drop out from beneath her feet. No, she whispered, horror pooling in her stomach. No, you are lying. I wish I was. Silas's voice cracked. If I die with this curse in my veins, the moment my heart stops, the Winterbane will jump to his blood. It will freeze his little heart, Elara. He will die the exact same way I am dying. A primal, terrifying rage ignited inside Elara's chest. The phoenix, the ancient fire she had suppressed for her entire life, roared thrashing against her ribs, demanding to be let out. Vesper had not just destroyed her marriage. Vesper had not just poisoned the king. Vesper had condemned her innocent 3-year-old son to a slow, agonizing death of ice and black blood. I did not come here to drag you back to a court that rejected you, Silas whispered, his strength fading fast. His head slumped against Elara's shoulder. I did not come to beg for your forgiveness, because I do not deserve it. I came to warn you. Silas lifted his heavy frost-covered hand and cupped Elara's cheek. The touch was freezing, but through the broken mate bond she felt the burning, sacrificial love of a true alpha. Take him and run, Silas commanded, his voice growing fainter. Run to the rogue territories. Find a witch. Find a healer. Find someone who can stop the curse from taking him when I am gone. Do not look back, Elara. I cannot run fast enough to outrun blood magic. Elara said, her voice eerily calm. Her eyes began to glow with a faint, unnatural, golden light. Then hide him. Silas closed his eyes, his breathing slowing down to a terrifying crawl. Just save my boy, Elara. Save our son. A loud, shattering crash exploded outside the cabin. The heavy wooden front door buckled violently inward. Clara screamed, dropping the blankets she had gathered. 3 massive wolves, their fur pitch black and their eyes glowing with unnatural, sickly green magic, smashed through the doorway. They were not ordinary wolves. They were Vesper's shadow assassins, mutated by dark magic, massive and dripping with venom. The largest wolf locked its glowing green eyes on Leo. It bared its razor-sharp teeth, a low, unnatural growl vibrating through the floorboards. Target acquired, the shadow wolf snarled, its voice like grinding stones. The Queen Mother sends her regards to the bastard heir. Silas let out a deafening, terrifying roar. The dying Alpha King forced himself off the floor. Ice cracked and shattered across his skin. Despite the poison shutting down his organs, despite his freezing blood, the instinct to protect his mate and his pup fueled one final explosive surge of power. Silas shifted, not into a full wolf but into a towering half-shifted lichen nightmare of muscle claws and silver fur. He threw his massive body directly between the assassins and his family. Run, Silas roared at Elara over his shoulder, his voice distorted by the shift. Run now. The 3 shadow wolves lunged at him simultaneously. Silas caught the first one by the throat, slamming it into the wall with bone-crushing force, but the other 2 sank their venomous fangs into his shoulders. Black blood sprayed across the floor. He was dying. He was sacrificing his final breaths to buy them seconds. Elara stood up. She did not grab the bags. She did not grab her cloak. She looked at the man tearing himself apart to protect them. She looked at the frost rapidly climbing up his throat, preparing to stop his heart and jump into her son's veins. Mama Leo cried, terrified. Elara turned to Clara. Take Leo to the back room. She ordered, her voice no longer trembling. Her voice echoed with a strange harmonic resonance. Do not come out until it is quiet. Clara grabbed the boy and bolted. Elara turned back to the bloodbath in her living room. Silas was on his knees again, burying his claws into a shadow wolf's chest, but the 3rd wolf had its jaws clamped around his neck. The frost was consuming him. His silver eyes met hers one last time, pleading with her to flee. But Elara was done running. She closed her eyes and visualized the heavy iron doors in her mind. The doors she had kept locked for 3 long years. The doors that held back her true nature. She reached out, and she shattered them completely. The shadow wolf's jaws tightened mercilessly around Silas's neck. The Alpha King's massive, clawed hands dropped heavily to his sides. The fight left his body. The ice surged forward, in a violent wave covering his broad chest, diving straight for his heart. Thump. A long, terrifying pause. Thump. His heart was stopping. Elara felt it through the frayed, dying edge of their mate bond. He was letting go. He was allowing himself to die, hoping his sacrifice would save his family completely unaware that the Winterbane was already preparing to jump to the next bloodline. To Leo. No, the single word did not just leave Elara's lips. It vibrated through the floorboards. It shattered the frozen windows. It commanded the very air in the room. The temperature in the cabin spiked instantly. The frosts creeping up the walls stopped. The bitter freezing wind howling through the broken door turned into a hot, suffocating summer gale. The scent of sharp pine and metallic blood was suddenly overwhelmed by the overwhelming, intoxicating scent of burning ozone, cinnamon, and pure liquid fire. The shadow wolf clamped onto Silas's neck froze. It dropped the dying king and turned its glowing green eyes toward Elara. Elara did not step back. She did not cower. She opened her eyes, and they were no longer a soft, human brown. They were pools of blinding liquid gold. For her entire life, Elara had been taught to hide. Her mother had warned her that the Alpha Kings would hunt her down if they knew the truth. The Phoenix Shifters were supposed to be a myth, an extinct bloodline of royals who did not shift into wolves, but into beings of primordial fire and light. They were the White Queens of ancient legends. She had buried that power to be a normal Luna. She had buried it to survive. Not anymore. Flames erupted from Elara's skin. They did not burn her clothes. They did not scorch the wooden floor. They were pure, white, hot, ethereal flames. Her dark hair lifted, turning a brilliant, glowing white, as the fire consumed the human disguise she had worn for years. A magnificent, terrifying aura of dominant power exploded from her small frame, completely dwarfing the alpha energy Silas had brought into the room. The three shadow wolves shrank back, whining in sudden, absolute terror. They were creatures of dark magic and cold. Elara was the sun itself. Kill her. The largest shadow wolf snarled, fighting its own fear. Kill the Omega. The beast lunged its venomous jaws, snapping toward her throat. Elara didn't even flinch. She simply raised her hand. A whip of solid white fire materialized in her palm. With a flick of her wrist, she struck the shadow wolf midair. The sound was like a crack of thunder. The fire sliced straight through the beast's dark magic. The massive wolf did not even have time to scream before it exploded into a cloud of harmless grey ash. The ash rained down on the wooden floor. The remaining two assassins scrambled backward, their claws tearing at the floorboards, desperate to escape through the broken door. You came into my home. Elara's voice was layered. It was her voice, but echoing beneath. It was the ancient, terrifying chorus of 1,000 Phoenix Queens. You threatened my son. You will not leave. She threw both hands forward. A torrent of blinding white fire roared from her palms. It swallowed the two retreating beasts entirely. There was a brief hiss of dark magic burning away, and then nothing. Just silence, heat, and the gentle settling of ash. Elara lowered her hands. The threat was gone, but the real battle had just begun. A sharp, agonizing gasp snapped her attention back to the floor. Silas. The Alpha King was convulsing. His eyes were rolled back in his head. The black veins on his neck pulsed violently. The Winterbane knew its host was dying. The curse was detaching itself from Silas's failing heart, preparing to seek out the nearest matching bloodline. A tendril of black freezing mist slithered out of Silas's mouth, drifting rapidly toward the back room where Leo was hiding. Not my son. You do not touch my son. Elara threw herself to the floor beside Silas. She grabbed the tendril of black mist with her bare, burning hand. The Winterbane hissed, fighting her heat, trying to freeze her fingers. But Elara's phoenix fire was older. It was stronger. The mist shrieked like a dying animal and evaporated into steam. But Silas was still dying. His chest stopped moving. His heart gave one final, pathetic flutter. No, no, no. Elara pressed both of her glowing hands flat against his massive frozen chest. Silas, stay with me. You do not get to die. Do you hear me? You do not get to leave us again." She closed her eyes and pushed her power into him. The phoenix fire poured from her palms, sinking straight through his skin, through his ribs, and into his failing heart. It was a brutal, agonizing process. The Winterbane had entrenched itself in his soul for 3 years. It fought back with the desperate fury of a blizzard. The cabin shook. Frost and fire clashed violently inside the Alpha King's body. Steam billowed off his skin in thick, choking clouds. Silas screamed, his back arched off the floor, his eyes flying open. But his eyes were not silver anymore. They were pitch black, completely consumed by the poison. "Burn," Elara commanded, pushing harder, pouring her own life force, her own soul into the flames. "Burn it all away." The white fire surged. It chased the black poison through his veins, boiling the frozen blood, melting the ice that had encased his heart. Elara felt his pain. Through the frayed edges of their mate bond, the agony of the curse hit her like a physical blow. But she also felt his relief. She felt his wolf, the powerful, majestic creature that had been trapped in a cage of ice for 3 years finally lift its head and howl. And then something miraculous happened. To break a blood curse, it required the fire of a true mate. But to completely purge it, it required the absolute, vulnerable merging of 2 souls. A true mate, full merge. Most wolves never achieved it. It required stripping away every secret, every lie, and every fear. As Elara's fire cleansed his heart, their severed mate bond found each other in the dark. It did not just reconnect, it fused. A golden shockwave exploded from their connected bodies, blowing the remaining furniture to pieces and sending a beam of pure light shooting through the cabin roof straight into the dark valley sky. In that single timeless second, Elara saw everything. She saw Silas standing on the dais 3 years ago, screaming inside his own mind, violently fighting his own frozen vocal cords as he banished her. She felt his terror. She felt his absolute soul-crushing despair when he woke up from the poison's haze and realized she was gone. She felt the endless nights he spent tearing through forests, bleeding, starving, searching for her scent. And Silas saw her. He felt the agonizing, physical pain of her walking through the blizzard. He felt the terrifying, lonely night she gave birth to Leo. He felt her fierce, protective love for their son. He felt the heavy, suffocating weight of the secret she carried, the fear of being hunted for her phoenix blood. He felt her love. It was still there. Buried beneath the ash, it had never died. The Winterbane shattered. The black veins on Silas's skin evaporated. The frost melted into warm water. Colour rushed back into his face. His chest heaved as he took a massive, greedy gulp of air. The white flame slowly retreated into Elara's skin. The blinding light faded, leaving the cabin illuminated only by the soft, warm glow of her golden eyes and her stark white hair. She slumped forward, completely exhausted, her head resting against his chest. Thump, thump, thump. His heart beat. It was strong. It was furious. It was alive. Elara. Silas's voice was no longer a raspy whisper. It was the deep, resonant rumble of an Alpha King restored to his full, terrifying glory. Strong arms, impossibly warm and firm, wrapped around her waist. He pulled her up, crushing her against his broad chest. He buried his face in her white hair, inhaling deeply. The scent of pine and winter rain was back, mixed with the warm, spicy scent of her phoenix fire. "You are alive," Silas choked out, burying his face in her neck, his tears hot against her skin. "You are here. You are real. I am here," Elara whispered, wrapping her arms tightly around his neck. The mate bond in her chest was singing a flawless, unbroken symphony of golden light. Silas pulled back just enough to look at her. He reached up his large, calloused hand, gently touching her white hair. He stared into her glowing golden eyes. There was no fear in his expression, no disgust, only absolute, reverent awe. A phoenix, he whispered, tracing the line of her jaw. My beautiful, fierce Luna is a white queen. I was afraid, Elara admitted, her voice trembling slightly. I was afraid if you knew what I was, you would look at me like a monster. The council would demand my execution. Let them demand it. Silas's silver eyes flashed with a dangerous, lethal promise. Let the entire world come for you. I will slaughter them all. You are my mate. You are my queen. And anyone who looks at you with anything less than worship will lose their head. The absolute certainty in his voice melted the last frozen piece of her heart. Mama? The soft, hesitant voice came from the hallway. Elara and Silas turned. Clara was standing in the doorway of the back room, her eyes wide with shock at the destruction of the cabin. But peeking out from behind her legs was Leo. Silas's breath caught. He slowly, carefully untangled himself from Elara and pushed himself up. He was fully healed. The Alpha King stood at his full, intimidating height. But when he looked at the little boy, he immediately dropped back to his knees. He held out his hands. Leo looked at Elara. The golden glow in his mother's eyes did not scare him. He looked back at the giant man, with eyes just like his own. The man was not covered in scary ice anymore. He looked warm. Is the bad king gone? Leo asked softly. Yes, little wolf. Silas promised, his voice thick with emotion. The bad king is gone forever. I am just your papa now, if you will have me. Leo hesitated for a second, then ran across the ash-covered floor. He threw his small arms around Silas's massive neck. Silas let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He wrapped his arms around his son, burying his face in the boy's dark hair, holding him as if he would never, ever let go. Elara moved closer, and Silas immediately pulled her into the embrace. For the first time in 3 years, the Ironhold royal family was whole, but the peaceful moment was fleeting. Silas lifted his head, his silver eyes hardening as he looked at the destroyed front door. The blizzard outside had stopped, but the war was just beginning. Vesper sent her best assassins, Silas said, his voice dropping into a lethal, commanding growl. When they do not return, she will know I am alive. She will know I found you. She is at the capital. Elara asked, her golden eyes narrowing. Yes, with my half-brother Rowan. She plans to crown him king the moment news of my death arrives. She holds the military. She holds the council. Elara stood up. Her white hair caught the moonlight drifting through the broken roof. She was no longer the frightened Omega who had fled into the night. She was a phoenix. She was the true queen. Then we do not wait for her to send more assassins. Elara said, the fire sparking at her fingertips. We go back to Ironhold. We take back our throne, and we burn her empire of lies to the ground. Silas stood beside her, his alpha aura flaring, perfectly intertwining with her phoenix fire. He looked at his mate, a vicious, proud smile spreading across his face. As you command, my queen. The journey back to the Ironhold capital took 2 days. They moved not as a fleeing Omega and a dying king, but as a united front of absolute, terrifying power. Silas carried his son on his broad shoulders, his silver eyes constantly scanning the tree line, his alpha aura projecting a suffocating wall of protection around his family. Elara walked beside him. The ancient fire hummed just beneath her skin, keeping the bitter winter wind at bay. The mate bond between them was a constant steady thrum. Thump, thump, thump. It was a golden thread woven through their very souls, whispering of absolute trust. Silas did not need to speak for Elara to know his mind. She could feel his quiet fury. She could feel his overwhelming fierce love for the little boy laughing on his shoulders. When the massive stone gates of the iron-hulled fortress finally loomed through the falling snow, Silas stopped. He reached out and took Elara's hand. His grip was warm and solid. "Are you ready, my queen?" Silas asked, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. Elara looked at the towering gates. 3 years ago she had walked out of those gates, broken, freezing, and convinced her life was over. Now her white hair blew in the wind, and her golden eyes burned with the heat of 1,000 suns. "Let us burn the rot out of our home," Elara said. The courtyard was deserted. The heavy oak doors of the great hall were sealed shut. Inside, the muffled sounds of a massive gathering echoed through the stone. It was coronation day. Vesper had wasted no time. Assuming her shadow assassins had successfully slaughtered Silas and the hidden heir, she was crowning her own son, Rowan, as the new Alpha King. Clara took Leo, wrapping him tightly in a heavy fur cloak. She stepped back into the shadows of the arched stone hallway. "Keep him safe." Silas commanded, his eyes flashing silver. "No matter what happens in that room." Clara nodded firmly. "I will protect him with my life, my king." Silas turned to the massive oak doors. He did not reach for the handles. He simply planted his heavy combat boot into the center of the wood. The impact sounded like a cannon blast. The heavy iron hinges snapped instantly. The massive doors flew inward, crashing against the stone walls, shattering the grand coronation ceremony into dead silence. 500 wolves turned. Gasps ripped through the hall. The scent of expensive perfumes and roasted meats was instantly annihilated by the suffocating dominant scent of a furious Alpha King and the sharp, crackling ozone of a phoenix. Silas strode into the hall. He was not dying. He was a mountain of muscle and rage. Elara walked perfectly in sync with him. Her blinding white hair and glowing golden eyes sent ripples of absolute terror and awe through the crowd. "The king," someone screamed from the back. "The king is alive." On the raised dais at the front of the hall, the scene was perfectly arranged for treason. Vesper stood in her finest black velvet gown, holding the iron crown. Rowan stood before her, looking pale and conflicted. And to the side stood Freya, the false Luna, whose face instantly drained of all colour when she saw Silas. "My dear stepmother." Silas's voice boomed. It did not just echo. It vibrated in the teeth of every wolf in the room. "You started the ceremony without me." Vesper's elegant mask cracked. For a fraction of a second, pure panic flared in her dark eyes. But she was a master manipulator. She quickly smoothed her expression into a mask of cold fury. "Guards." Vesper shrieked, pointing a trembling, jeweled finger at Silas. "That is not the king. It is an impostor created by dark magic. The king is dead. Kill them both." 10 royal guards hesitated. They looked at Silas, feeling his undeniable, suffocating alpha aura. You could not fake a true king's scent. It was impossible. "I said kill them," Vesper screamed. When the guards still did not move, Silas smiled. It was a vicious, blood-chilling expression. "Your orders hold no weight here, Vesper," Silas said, his voice dropping into a lethal, chest-rattling growl. "I know about the Winterbane. I know you poisoned the ceremonial wine 3 years ago. I know you orchestrated the rejection of my true mate. And I know you sent shadow assassins to murder my 3-year-old son." The hall erupted. 500 voices shouted in absolute shock. The nobles backed away from the dais, their eyes wide with horror. A son, Freya whispered, taking a step away from Vesper. "You never told me about a son." "Shut up, you useless girl," Vesper hissed. She turned her venomous gaze to Rowan. "Rowan, do your duty. You are the alpha now. Shift and tear his throat out." Rowan stood frozen. He looked at his older half-brother. He looked at the massive, terrifying power rolling off Silas. And then he looked at Elara. He saw the golden fire dancing in her pupils. He felt the pure, ancient magic radiating from her skin. Rowan had always wanted the crown. He had always felt overshadowed by Silas. But he was not a monster. Rowan. Vesper's voice was a toxic hiss. I gave you this kingdom. Take it. Rowan slowly reached up and unclasped his ceremonial cape. It dropped to the stone floor with a heavy thud. He looked his mother directly in the eyes. I wanted to be king, mother, Rowan said, his voice shaking but resolute. But not like this. I will not build my throne on the blood of my brother and an innocent child. He stepped off the dais and walked down the steps. He stopped in front of Silas and lowered his head, exposing his throat in the ultimate gesture of submission. I yield to the true Alpha King, Rowan declared loudly. The entire hall followed suit. 500 wolves dropped to their knees. The sound of bodies hitting the stone floor echoed like a thunderclap. Vesper was completely alone on the dais. Traitor Vesper screamed at her son's back. You weak, pathetic coward. She was cornered. Her assassins were dead. Her son had betrayed her. Her political power had evaporated in seconds. But Vesper was not going to surrender. She reached beneath the heavy folds of her velvet gown and pulled out a small, intricately carved iron box. The temperature in the room instantly plummeted. The torches lining the walls flickered and died. A wave of unnatural, primordial cold swept over the kneeling crowd. Frost rapidly exploded across the stone floor, creeping up the pillars, freezing the wine in the goblets. If I cannot rule this pack, Vesper snarled, her breath coming out in white clouds, then there will be no pack left to rule. She flipped the iron latch and opened the box. Inside sat a jagged, glowing shard of pure black ice, the Winter Heart. It was an ancient, forbidden artifact of blood magic. It did not just freeze water, it froze souls. A shockwave of absolute zero blasted outward from the dais. The wolves closest to the front screamed as ice instantly encased their limbs. Silas stepped forward, throwing his massive body in front of Elara to shield her. But Elara pushed past him. This is my fight, Elara said, her voice echoing with the layered resonance of the phoenix. Elara stepped into the center of the hall. The wave of black ice rushed towards her, devouring the stone floor, snapping like frozen jaws. She did not run. She simply closed her eyes and inhaled. The fire ignited. It did not start as a spark. It erupted as a massive, blinding pillar of white, hot flame that shot from Elara's body all the way to the vaulted ceiling. The heat was so intense it instantly vaporized the creeping frost. The stone floor beneath her feet began to glow cherry red, melting into slag. Vesper shrieked, holding the Winter Heart higher. Black mist poured from the artifact, forming massive, jagged spears of dark ice that launched themselves directly at Elara's chest. Elara opened her glowing golden eyes. She raised her hand. A wall of pure, liquid fire materialized in the air. The ice spears slammed into the fire and instantly hissed into steam. The smell of boiling water and burning ozone filled the hall. You cannot defeat me, Vesper screamed, her face twisting into a demonic mask of desperation. The Winter Heart is older than your bloodline. It will freeze your very soul. Elara took a step forward. Her white hair whipped wildly in the superheated air. Then it is a good thing I am not fighting with just my soul, Elara replied. She reached back without looking. Silas was right there. He stepped into the inferno completely unharmed by his mate's fire. He grabbed her outstretched hand, their fingers intertwined tightly. Thump, thump, thump. The mate bond flared violently. The golden thread connecting their chests turned into a blazing cable of pure energy. Silas poured his massive alpha strength, his dominance and his raw, unbreakable love directly into Elara. He anchored her, he fueled her, their fires merged. Elara did not just cast fire anymore. She became it. She lifted her free hand toward the dais. "Burn," Elara commanded. A concentrated beam of pure, blinding white light shot from her palm. It did not just hit Vesper, it hit the winter heart. The clash between absolute heat and absolute cold created a deafening, high-pitched screech. The air in the room warped and distorted. Vesper screamed as the heat blistered her skin. She tried to hold on to the artifact, pouring her own life force into it, refusing to let go of her power. But the love of a true mate was an unstoppable force of nature. The white fire surged. It pierced the black ice. With a sound like a shattering mountain, the winter heart exploded. A shockwave of steam and ash blasted through the great hall. Vesper was thrown backward, crashing violently into the stone wall behind the throne. She crumpled to the floor, completely motionless. The blinding light faded. The roaring fire receded, pulling back into Elara's skin until only a soft, warm glow remained. The hall was silent. The terrifying, unnatural cold was gone. The torches flickered back to life, casting a warm golden light over the terrified, awe-struck crowd. Elara stood in the center of the melted stone, breathing heavily. Her hand was still tightly locked with Silas's. He pulled her flush against his side, wrapping a protective arm around her waist, kissing the top of her white hair. "It is over," Silas whispered against her skin. Elara looked up at the dais. Vesper lay on the ground, groaning in pain. Her velvet dress was scorched. Her hair was singed. She was alive, but her power was entirely gone. The iron box was reduced to a puddle of melted metal. "Guard," Silas commanded. His voice was calm but absolute. "Take the traitor to the dungeons. She will face the council tribunal tomorrow." The guards, who had been frozen in terror moments before, rushed forward and dragged Vesper's limp body away. Freya, the false Luna, dropped to her knees, trembling violently. "Mercy, my king," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I did not know about the Winterbane. I swear it Vesper promised me glory." "I was foolish." Silas looked down at her with cold indifference. "You stood by while my true mate was cast out into a blizzard. You paraded around this hall wearing stolen titles. You will be stripped of your rank and banished to the Northern Ridge. If you ever set foot in Ironhold territory again, you will be executed." Freya sobbed louder, but she nodded frantically, scrambling backward out of the hall. The threat was gone. The poison was burned away. The betrayers were dealt with. Silas turned his attention to the 500 wolves, still kneeling on the floor. He stepped forward, pulling Elara with him. He did not speak as a conqueror. He spoke as a father, a husband, and a true alpha. 3 years ago, I failed this pack. Silas's voice rang clear and true. I allowed darkness to infiltrate this hall. I allowed the greatest treasure of my life to be driven away. Silas turned to Elara. In front of the entire kingdom, the massive, terrifying Alpha King dropped to one knee. Gasps echoed through the room. A king never knelt, not for anyone. But Silas took Elara's small hand and pressed it to his lips. He looked up at her, his silver eyes shining with absolute devotion. "You saved my life. You saved our son. You saved this kingdom," Silas said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "You are the fire in my blood. You are the White Queen of Ironhold. And I am yours, body and soul, for eternity." Elara's vision blurred with happy tears. She squeezed his hand, the mate bond singing a beautiful, flawless melody in her chest. "Stand, my king," Elara whispered, smiling. "We have a pack to lead." Silas rose to his feet. He did not let go of her hand. He turned to the crowd, his silver eyes sweeping over the 500 wolves, who were still kneeling in absolute submission on the melted stone floor. "Rise," Silas commanded. His voice was no longer a weapon of war. It was the steady, protective thunder of a true leader. The wolves stood, their heads bowed in deep respect. "Bring him forward," Silas called out, looking toward the dark stone archway at the back of the great hall. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Clara walked slowly down the center aisle. In her arms, wrapped securely in a thick white fur cloak, was Leo. The little boy's silver eyes were wide, taking in the massive crystal chandeliers, the charred walls near the dais, and the hundreds of stared faces. He squirmed out of Clara's arms as soon as they reached the front steps. "Mama, Papa." Leo ran up the dais, his small boots pattering against the stone. Silas dropped to his knees again, catching his son in a massive, warm embrace. He lifted Leo up, holding the 3-year-old boy, so the entire kingdom could see him. "Look closely." Silas's voice echoed with fierce, undeniable pride. "Look at his eyes. Look at his spirit. This is Leo. He was born in the freezing wilderness. He was raised by the strongest woman to ever walk this earth. He carries the blood of the Alpha King and the sacred fire of the White Queen." Silas looked at the nobles, his gaze daring anyone to challenge his next words. "He is the true and only heir to the Ironhold throne, the crown prince." For a moment there was silence. Then Rowan, standing at the base of the dais, drew his heavy iron sword and drove the tip into the stone floor. He knelt. "All hail Prince Leo," Rowan shouted. "All hail Prince Leo." The 500 wolves roared in unison. The sound shook the ancient banners hanging from the vaulted ceiling. Leo giggled, burying his face in his father's dark hair. "They are very loud, Papa." Silas laughed, a deep, rich sound that Elara had missed for 3 long years. "They are my little wolf, but they are your pack now." Elara leaned her head against Silas's broad shoulder, wrapping her arms around both of them. The mate bond hummed a perfect peaceful lullaby in her chest. The long winter was finally over. 6 months later, the bitter cold of the Ironhold Mountains had surrendered to a lush, golden summer. The palace gardens were in full bloom, bursting with vibrant wildflowers, sweet-smelling jasmine and towering green pines. The air was thick with the scent of sun-warmed earth and sweet honey. Elara stood on the grand balcony of the royal chambers, feeling the gentle summer breeze play with her white hair. She wore a simple, elegant gown of soft blue silk. The heavy silver crown of the White Queen sat proudly on her head, but she felt lighter than she ever had in her entire life. The kingdom had healed. The trial of Vesper had been swift. The former Queen Mother was stripped of her rank, stripped of her wolf, and banished to the deepest, darkest dungeon of the fortress. She was left to rot with the memory of her failed ambitions. Rowan had proven his loyalty and was appointed as the lead ambassador to the Western Pax. Freya was gone, just a ghost of the past, but more importantly, her family had healed. "Got you?" A delighted squeal rang out from the garden below. Elara looked down and smiled. Silas was running across the manicured grass, his massive frame moving with startling speed. He was not wearing his heavy royal armor, just a loose linen shirt and dark trousers. He scooped Leo up by the waist, throwing the laughing boy high into the air and catching him safely against his broad chest. "Papa again." Leo demanded, his silver eyes shining with pure joy. "You are going to exhaust the king, little wolf." Elara called down from the balcony, her voice laced with warm amusement. Silas looked up. The moment his silver eyes locked onto hers, The mate bond in her chest gave a warm, familiar flutter. Even after 6 months of waking up next to her, every single day, he still looked at her as if she hung the moon and the stars. The king has boundless energy when it comes to his true family. Silas shouted back, grinning handsomely. But perhaps the king needs a kiss from his queen to recharge. He jogged up the sweeping stone stairs leading to the balcony, carrying Leo under one arm, like a sack of flour, making the boy giggle uncontrollably. Silas set Leo down on his feet and stepped up to Elara. He wrapped his strong arms around her waist, pulling her flush against his solid chest. His scent, that perfect blend of sharp pine winter rain and pure alpha warmth, enveloped her completely. He leaned down and captured her lips in a deep, slow kiss. It was a kiss that tasted like victory, survival, and endless devotion. Leo covered his eyes with his small hands. Mama and Papa are kissing again. Silas pulled back, chuckling. He ruffled Leo's dark hair. You will understand when you find your mate one day, my boy. Elara rested her hands on Silas's chest, feeling the steady, powerful rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her palms. Thump, thump, thump. It was her favorite sound in the world. You are quiet today, my queen, Silas murmured, tracing the line of her cheek with his thumb. Are you happy? Elara looked out over the sprawling green forests of the Ironhold territory. She thought about the night she had walked out of those heavy oak doors, pregnant freezing, and convinced she was utterly worthless. She had believed she was a weak Omega, who deserved to be rejected. She had been so wrong. She had always carried the fire of a queen inside her. She just needed a reason to let it burn. I am more than happy. Elara whispered, looking back up into her mate's eyes. I am at peace, but I do have a secret I need to tell you. Silas's expression shifted, a flicker of protective concern crossing his handsome features. A secret. You know, you never have to hide anything from me ever again. Elara, whatever it is, I will face it with you. Elara smiled, taking his large hand and slowly moving it down her body. She pressed his warm palm flat against her lower stomach. It is not a bad secret, Silas. Elara said, her golden eyes shimmering with unshed tears of joy. I spoke with the royal healers this morning. Silas froze. His eyes widened, darting from her stomach up to her face. He stopped breathing. The massive Alpha King looked as if he had just been struck by lightning. Elara, he choked out his voice, a ragged whisper. Leo is going to be a big brother, Elara confirmed softly. A sound escaped Silas's throat that was part laugh, part sob. He dropped to his knees right there on the sunlit balcony. He wrapped his arms around Elara's waist, pressing his face gently against her stomach. He was trembling violently. Thank you. Silas wept, completely unashamed of his tears. Thank you, my beautiful queen. Thank you for this life. Thank you for never giving up on us. Leo trotted over, looking confused, but very excited. A brother or a sister. Can we play swords? Silas pulled Leo into the embrace, burying his face in his son's neck, holding his growing family together. We can play whatever you want, little wolf. Elara stroked Silas's dark hair, looking up at the clear blue summer sky. The ancient phoenix fire in her blood hummed a soft, content melody. She had walked away into the snow with nothing. She had survived the harsh wilderness, raised a prince in the shadows, and returned to burn a corrupt empire to the ground. She had saved the man who had broken her heart, and in doing so she had healed her own. She was no longer the rejected Luna. She was the White Queen. And as she stood in the arms of the Alpha King, surrounded by the scent of pine and summer blooms, she knew with absolute certainty that the winter would never touch her family again. The fire had won. Thank you for listening to this story. If Elara's journey from a rejected, bleeding Luna to a fierce, protective White Queen moved your heart, please let me know. In the comments, would you have forgiven the Alpha King? After 3 years, hit the like button, subscribe for more epic shifter romances, and I will see you in the next tale.